Hello there, welcome back to our set of shows. Today I'm going to talk about Blowout, the Brian DePalma film. I watched this in the Criterion version. There's also an Arrow version, which I've also got. You can find it in streaming, which I've also got. I have not got the 4K version yet, but give it time, I will get it eventually, because I am a big DePalma fan. So, yeah, I'm going to get the 4K eventually. Just haven't got it yet. It's a bit expensive. And Criterion and 4K are a bit more excessively expensive than most places. Plus, yeah, it's really waiting for a sale for them because it's like £30 for a 4K, and it's like everywhere else is like £20, £25. They have £30. It feels like they're going a bit far. It's like one of those things where this is one of even Criterion where you definitely have to wait for a sale for a 4K because the prices are taking a mickey slightly. So yeah, so Blowout is one of the DePalma films that's viewed as one of his best ones. It's one of the ones that are. It's the thing is like this is a top class DePalma type of thing. It's like from the 70s and the 80s, DePalma was at a peak. Even though he's controversial at the time, that's where a lot of the work that people love comes from. I still think he was very interested in the 90s and the 2000s. I think he did a lot of good work there as well. But it was less iconic. It didn't quite, hit the same effect that other films they made during the 70s and 80s really made. I mean, he made films in the 60s as well. And those are more cult films. And it sort of like went back to where he was at the start of his career, in a sense, where he was making films where he didn't care as much about making films that were the zeitgeist films. He was much more interested in doing what he wanted to do. In the 70s and 80s, he was in the mainstream. He was making films. He was ambitious to make films that would get a mass audience. In the 90s, the kind of culture changed a little bit. I think DePalma changed. I think he got fed up with the studio system, and he survived through the 90s, the studio system, but Mission to Mars in 2000, I think, kind of ended that for him. It was like, okay, I've had enough of this. So, but this was the early 80s. He was making these films, and to be honest, even then he wasn't fully in studio, because he had a reputation of being like a lot of the movie brat generation. He knew what he wanted to do. He was not someone who could get pushed around by the studios, so sometimes the studios would hire him, sometimes they were a bit leery of him. Maybe you look at Scorsese at the time, he had the same problems. Coppola had the same problems. Coppola was trying to take over stuff and do it his own way. Lucas self-financed, and he was sort of financially successful because of Star Wars and Jones films. There was a variety of things. I mean, only Spielberg really did well in the studios. He really knew how to work the studios, but the rest kind of hovered around the studios, but they were in and out. De Palma was one of them. I mean, after this one, he went into the studio system for a while. But Blowout was an Orion film. It was independently produced, and it was sold to Orion as a package because John Travolta as a star. It followed on from Dress to Kill, which is a massive hit. Very controversial, but massive hit. I read in a video on that film. And in the 70s, De Palma had a bunch of well-made films that did well. I mean, he had Sisters that did well. Phantom of the Paradise didn't do that well, but was a cult film. He had Carrie. He had Obsession, which was kind of a weird one. The Fury was a success, but it wasn't like a critical success. But Blowout and Dress to Kill and Blowout is where we started to really get momentum, because it followed this with Scarface, which was one of his big iconic films. And then he did Body Double, which was hated at the time, but now is looked upon as an interesting De Palma film. It's one of those ones where certain aspects of what he was getting at weren't available to people because he was commenting on what was going around at the time, and they didn't. Later on, you can look back and say, "Oh, that's all about the mid '80s and all the weird obsessions of mid '80s." But at the time, if you're in it, you probably wouldn't have a chance to step back and see, "Oh, this is about us." Or if you did see, "Oh, this is about us," we would have been like, "That's not good. We don't want to hear this." So, De Palma always had a tendency to bite the hand that fed him. He had a tendency to say things in the films that would offend people. I mean, Scarface was all about the drug cartels and coming into America, but it's also just about capitalism and how corrosive it could be if it was unchecked. You know, it's like, it's one of those things where capitalism, to a certain point, is good, then at a certain point it becomes something that eats itself. And that Scarface is about the point where it goes over from something that can be helpful and build things to something that can be just eat itself to make more profits. Blowout is much more about the conspiracy world and the conspiracy theories that go around the world and how they affect people both involved in the conspiracy and people try to work out the conspiracy. It's all about conspiracy. You know, DePalma was about this in the 60s. He was a guy who admitted he was into the JFK assassination stuff because it was so obvious that something dodgy was going on in that one. There was quite a few films with political assassinations going on in his early films with De Niro. I mean, Hi Mom is especially political, but Greetings is political too, but Hi Mom's especially political, all about how you survive in a system, a kind of capitalist system that's not really out for your own health, really, how the kind of corrosive side effects of that system goes into your mental undoing. So De Palma is one of those directors who, he seems to admire capitalism but also disdains it. He's like, I think there's a certain point where it's good to a point, and then there's a point where it gets really troublesome. And organisations as well, just organisations, no matter who they come from, how people organise, and how people try and basically sell themselves to try and get ahead. You can see that all through his films, with like Phantom of the Paradise, which is all about that. And this one is about how people try to sell a political conspiracy when they're just trying to get rid of somebody. So basically the plot is this guy who is going to be one of the next presidents, basically. He was going to be his president candidate, and he was going to go on to be one of the nominations. And the people behind the scenes don't want him to be one of the nominated people because I think they just didn't like what he was going to do. So they arranged a political assassination, just like your JFK, just like RFK, just a political assassination. And it kind of goes wrong, but only slightly. The guy dies, and the plan basically was, in this, to get rid of the guy, was not about killing him. It was like a scandal. They're going to arrange a blowout of his car. The car would skid. Someone would take photographs and see him with a hooker, and that would get all over the place, and it would be discredited. That was the idea. Unfortunately, the guy who they assigned to do it went a bit far. The car went over the side. John Travolta at the time was a sound man who was recording new sounds for a slasher film, and he sees it happening, and he goes in and saves the girl, but the presidential candidate dies. Now, they don't want knowledge of her or the recording at all in the media. They just do not want that, because that would help show a conspiracy, because the sound effect would show that, yeah, there is a conspiracy. There's something's wrong in this thing. So they asked him to say he wasn't there, and they just basically say, well, get rid of the girl, we'll just pay her off, you just say nothing, and it's an accident, it happened, there's nothing we can do about it, it was an accident, we just don't want to ruin his reputation. And Travolta goes along with it. It's like, okay, I don't like doing this, but I can see what's going on. It's like, okay, it's for the better good for his family. But then as he listens to the sound, it returns to him to what his initial thought was. There was a blowout, there was a sound. And at the same time, the guy who was meant to be the photographer of this thing, to get the footage, he recorded the visuals. And the visuals don't really... Without the sound, the visual just looked like it was a blowout and it goes over the side. But with the sound, you can tell it's a gunshot. So it's about Travolta trying to try to get the information, try and get the footage and get it all together. Because initially he just has footage from a magazine that shows every frame. And it's not good enough quality to really see it. So it's about Travolta trying to figure out the conspiracy as well as John Lithgow was a guy who did the assassination, trying to cover his tracks and make sure the operation goes well, because he's like one of the CIA guys who have been a bit themselves too long and are a bit too cold-hearted and nasty. And in the middle of it's Nancy Allen, who's a girl in the car, and she's not very bright. She just wants to be a makeup girl, and she's been doing these like blackmail pictures with Dennis Francis, the guy who shot the film, and she's been told to get out of town. She doesn't, because Travolta stops her. So basically, if Travolta had just let her leave, it would have been fine. Everyone would have been quiet and it would have been fine. No one would have cared. Maybe there'd be a few conspiracy nuts, but nothing would have happened. And this is one of those films why it works so well, is it's by culpability of Travolta wants to know what happened at the expense of everything else. He ignores the emotional consequences of all he's doing because he's the past where his actions caused someone to die. When he was part of the Serpico investigations in the 70s, he was one of those guys who was bugging the policemen undercover to get the information on the corrupt cops. And because one of his operations went wrong, he's trying to redeem himself in his own head, but he's so oblivious to all the other consequences of this thing where he should just let it go. But because he keeps pushing, more and more murders are taking place. Things are getting out of control, and Lithgow is going more and more extreme to keep the cover-up going. So the story really is about how Travolta pushes this situation and his own culpability and the conspiracy as it gets more and more crazy. Just the same way how there's always an ambiguity when you look at conspiracy theorists. They want the truth. They feel like there's something wrong, and getting to the truth will improve so much, but it causes a lot of damage as it goes, because you do need the truth, but you also need to be aware of the issues at hand. It's not going to solve the political system. The political system's still going to be corrupt, and all you're doing is fixating on one example of it rather than what in the structure is causing the problems, not this individual problem. It's like you want to solve everything by saying, I did this. It's sort of like saying all these reporters want to be next Woodward and Bernstein who got Watergate, and it's like, as if that's the issue. The issue is, yes, they showed that Nixon was corrupt, but the political system, the issues about the political system are much more complicated than that one thing. And going for a big blowout, I proved it, I proved I was right, against what happens in daily life and what happens day to day that causes a rot in the system. You know, that's much harder to do, but it's like the kind of white knight thing people have about, I will prove myself right. And this film's about the downside of that. Like, yeah, you might prove yourself right, but what cost? By the end of this film, Travolta's character is pretty damaged by what he's done and what he's seen, because he cannot really deny that in this case a lot of the, I'm not going to give away all the plots or anything, it's an old film but some people might not have seen it, but a lot of things happen that are Travolta's fault because he's so focused on proving himself. And the film's also about all of those things about the JFK assassination where people died later on. Apparent witnesses died later on in accidents. Whether the accidents or whether not, then it's a bit. If you watch the Oliver Stone documentary, the Oliver Stone film JFK, it's like everything was a conspiracy. Or was some of it real life just that happened? I mean, things happen in real life. It's not all just focused on everything's a conspiracy. You know, conspiracies happen, but there is a kind of sense of the limited, because the more crazy you get with it, the more chance you are going to get of being exposed. So this is like what happens, the paranoia of what happens with a lot of people who might be witnesses. And this one is a case of, oh yeah, there actually is a reason to be threatened because of Travolta not letting Nancy Allen leave early on to find out, because she's the key to getting more information, to find out about Dennis Franz's involvement, to figuring out about the different conspiracies. Even though she doesn't know anything, she's kind of the linchpin. But should he be putting some poor girl in this situation where she's not really up to this task? She's really not up to it. You know, and he's really not up to it either, but he thinks he is. He thinks I'm smart, I can deal with this. But he's really not. So it's about the kind of extravagant sense of self-worth and the destruction of what you cause other people to do to protect themselves. You know, and even though they're guilty as hell, it causes more and more damage. So this film's a much more ambiguous look at this white knight thing than most films would have. And I think that's why it didn't do well. It was like, yeah, we're behind him trying to solve the conspiracy, but the film's really about the damage done by trying to solve the conspiracy. In a way that most films, they have plots that unwind and you find out the conspiracy, and at the end of it, things are solved and it's like, oh, it was all worth it. This one is like, is it really worth it? It's much more like parallax view and things like that, the 70s conspiracy movies, where, is it really worth it? Is it? These things are going on and it's a horrible part of society. And fighting against them is useful, but it's how do you fight against them? And are you doing it for your own needs rather than an actual something that can actually be helpful? And what methods you're actually using? Because ultimately, this is a film where, yeah, what happened was horrible, but it causes so much more chaos, and the chaos is more damaging than the actual original event. Because ultimately, it was just a politician who died, and when he got into power, he'd probably just be as corrupt as any other politician who becomes president or prime minister or whatever. You know, he was never going to change the system. These people never do. No matter what they promise at the time, they never change the system. So it's one of those things where the film is, and if you look at DePalma's films, he's cynical about the people involved and the top level politics. And even this film, it suggested this guy wasn't as great as people thought he was. So again, he puts it back into the realm of the conspiracy theories. What are you really fighting for? What are you really looking for? Is it worth it? And is it self-aggrandizing really, or is there a more social aspect to it that is worth fighting for? And in this one, it's all personal to Travolta. It's all about improving it right. He has motivations. He can talk people into things for this has to be done to show that they can't do this. But it's really about himself. And that's ultimately his problem, is he's not as smart as the Lithgow character, who's always one step ahead of him. And he's always trying to cover his tracks, and he's a psycho who will cover his tracks in any way possible. So it's a really wonderful film. I mean, Joe Dante has said that he doesn't like it because of some errors that in the way things are done that don't match up, and the way they, you know, we've had Philadelphia shot because the roads don't lead to those places. The film shows are like, well, it's a melodrama ultimately. Most films are, you know, are we going to actually just pick holes in Gremlins for? That's not how Gremlin would react. It just feels a bit weird. It's like, it's obviously a melodrama, and it's the points slowly moving forward to get to a conclusion. And as someone who has seen Glasgow shot in so many ways in Edinburgh and places, they never lead to the right place. It's just filmmaking. I think he's just been picky. I should have director been picky. Some other director, really, ultimately. But this is a wonderful film. This is just wonderful. This is one of De Palma's best films. And it does have a sense of tragedy and a sense of damage done to people, and just a sense of conspiracy theories. You need to investigate that stuff, but you need to do it for the right reasons and do it with the exact amount of caution that's required. You know, and this film shows you how you don't do it, and it shows you how much damage can be done if you do it wrong. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back soon with another one. Right, that's me for now. Bye.